Welcome everyone. Thank you for tuning in to the news summary for day 385 of the war in Ukraine, brought to you by The Account. Today I have one article I want to point out and one separate segment regarding the latest Ramstein-10 meeting. All other updates are grouped into the usual situation inside Ukraine, including the presidential decrees dismissing the 3 administration heads, the occupied territories, with an update to Brady Africk's Fortification map, Russia and Belarus, containing an article about Russian plans to recruit 400,000 soldiers, and the international developments, with several interesting topics from aid for Ukraine to why you cannot trust Russia on numbers. But first, the flashpoint along the front. Kupiansk. According to available video footage, Russian forces captured the settlement of Ryanikivka. Bakhmut. The situation in and around Bakhmut remains critical as Russia continues to make smaller gains inside Bakhmut. Ukrainian forces recaptured trenches northwest of Romova and fought off a subsequent counterattack. The soldiers of the 93rd Holotny Yar Mechanized Brigade have shot down a Russian Su-24 fighter jet near the city of Bakhmut. Yevgeny Prigozhin, head of the Wagner PMC, reported today that his mercenaries captured the village of Zaliznyansk. The Ukrainian Deputy Minister of Defense, Hanna Maliar, announced that Ukrainian forces had some success in the north of Bakhmut, but the situation is dynamic. More details cannot be disclosed at the current time. The Kyiv Independent published a lengthy article about soldiers stationed in and around Bakhmut telling their story. One of their main worries is that Russia is beginning to taste victory in Bakhmut. Colonel Serhiy Cherevati, the spokesman for the Eastern Group of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, on the other hand, reported that it will be difficult to even call Russian advances around Bakhmut a Pyrrhic victory, as they were achieved at such a high price. And now for the article I want to point out, titled Secret Kremlin Document: How Russia Plans to Overturn Moldova. Technically, these are 2 articles, but both cover the exact same topic. Who does not remember the leaked document from February 2023 detailing the Kremlin's plan to take over Belarus by 2030? Now V-Square claims to have received a similar document with a similar plan. The target this time, Moldova. Russia's goal, to take control over Moldova. Russia's method, hybrid warfare, by supporting pro-Putin politicians, activists and the Orthodox Church, by making the country dependent on Russian gas, by discouraging the EU and NATO, and by stirring up social conflicts. It is a very interesting article and claim. I'm saying claim as the actual document has yet to be published. However, there are already some events in motion. Please check it out for the details. To start the news segment, the updates regarding the latest Ramstein-10 meeting. 9 countries have already agreed to send more than 150 Leopard tanks to Ukraine, United States Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin said. One of them is Sweden, who will send 10 Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine. Austin also stated that the participating states of the Ramstein meeting will consider how to solve the problem of ammunition production for Ukraine. He went on to explain that in a telephone conversation with his Russian counterpart Sergei Shoigu, he stated that Russia is obliged to fly its military aircraft safely and professionally. Canada's Defense Minister Anita Anand stated after the meeting that her country will provide Ukraine with artillery and air defense ammunition. Oleksiy Reznikov, the Defense Minister of Ukraine, has said that the results of the regular meeting in the Ramstein format make him optimistic. During the meeting, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg stated that NATO is ready to strengthen Ukraine's air defense, supply ammunition, and send more armor. A look at all the minor updates out of Ukraine. After the Cabinet of Ministers decided yesterday to dismiss 3 administration heads, President Zelensky has signed the respective decrees, officially dismissing the heads of Luhansk, Odessa, and Khmelnytsky Oblast's state administrations. According to analysts, in February of this year, Russia managed to seize less than 0.04% of the entire territory of Ukraine. The Ministry of Defense of Ukraine has set up a designated department tasked with preventing corruption in the ministry. State concern Ukroboronprom, in cooperation with an unnamed NATO member state, started the production of 125mm tank ammunition. The first batch has already been handed over to the Ukrainian military. In order for Ukraine's counteroffensive to be successful, Ukraine's defense minister Oleksiy Reznikov listed 3 requirements. The first one is to put the enemy on the defensive. The second one is to deprive him of air superiority. The third one is to destroy his logistics chains. Of these 3 requirements, 2 factors are involving aircraft. Next up, the latest regarding the situation in the occupied territories. Explosions were reported in Mariupol by local residents, according to Russian news. However, the Kremlin did not comment on these reports. Junior and middle school students in Crimea are being taught hand-to-hand combat, how to assemble weapons, and wear uniforms. I mentioned this in an earlier report, but this is a map created by Brady Africk, which is tracking fortifications built by Russia in the occupied territories. As more information is added, it is fairly easy to see how and where the fortified line is set up. Moving on to the news updates from Russia and Belarus. The Russian Defense Ministry will start a new recruitment of professional soldiers to the Russian army starting on April 1st. The goal is to replenish the army by recruiting 400,000 new soldiers. Yesterday, Vladimir Putin, President of Russia, complained that there is a shortage of personnel working in the defense industry. Today, the Ministry of Industry and Trade submitted a list of workers vital to the war effort to the Ministry of Defense, asking for their exemption from the spring draft. Russia's Security Council head Nikolai Patrushev said that Russia is looking to retrieve the wreckage of the US MQ-9 Reaper drone that was deliberately forced down by a Russian Su-27 fighter jet over the Black Sea. Russia, China, and Iran have started the Security Belt 2023 joint maritime exercises in the Gulf of Oman, which will last until March 19th. After yesterday's update about summonses being handed out in Voronezh Oblast, Russia, today it was reported that military enlistment officers have begun sending summonses to men in Lipetsk, Tyumen, Sverdlovsk, Penza, and Voronezh Oblasts, as well as Krasnodar Krai. And to wrap up the news segment, the international developments. A bipartisan group of 8 senators is pressing the Pentagon chief to provide more information on what is needed to supply Ukraine with F-16 fighter jets. The US State Department said that Russia is creating offensive biological weapons and at the same time lying about biolaboratories in Ukraine. Brigadier General Pat Ryder, a representative of the US Ministry of Defense, announced that Ukraine faces a tough fight against Russia in the spring and summer and promised to help solve the ammunition problem. "Don't trust Russia's numbers," wrote Agathe Desmarais, Director of Global Forecasts at the Economist Intelligence Unit, in an article for US magazine Foreign Policy. Russia has made economic statistics a central part of its information war. Moscow's goal is clear: to argue that sanctions do not work, thereby undercutting those who think they are a key tool to stop or contain Russia's aggression against Ukraine. The Danish government and the parliament's majority have agreed to allocate an additional 7 billion Danish kroner, about $1 billion in civil, defense, and economic aid for Ukraine. Meanwhile, the Danish Ministry of Defense announced the allocation of another, so far ninth package of military aid with military equipment specifically requested by Ukraine, amounting to 1 billion Danish kroner. Piotr Müller, Polish government spokesman, informed that Warsaw had received clear declarations from several countries willing to supply Ukraine with MiG-29 fighter jets. Poland's Internal Security Agency has detained 6 people who are suspected of being part of a Russian spy ring, allegedly tasked with spying on transfer points for weapons to Ukraine and planning acts of sabotage. The authorities detained the suspects in connection with the discovery of dozens of hidden cameras on railway junctions, the airport, and other important routes that recorded and transmitted vehicle movements. And now for the intelligence report segment, starting with the UK Ministry of Defense. Since the start of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Russian public officials and workers have been subject to increasingly severe foreign travel restrictions. Some officials have likely had to forfeit their passports to the Federal Security Service. Employees closer to the center of power face more severe restrictions. Kremlin officials are banned from all international leisure travel. This is a widening of existing measures which date from the Soviet era. Travel restrictions were tightened after the Russian annexation of Crimea in 2014. The measures are likely designed to prevent the flight or defection of increasingly disaffected officials. There is a realistic possibility that as the securization of the Russian state continues, travel restrictions will be tightened for an increasing number of public sector employees. A look at the latest assessment by the Institute for the Study of War. Russian President Vladimir Putin announced a new strategy to mobilize the struggling Russian defense industrial base for a protracted war effort, according to the Institute. The researchers referenced an announcement about the list of specialities that could get a deferral from military service. The Russian Ministry of Industry and Trade prepared the list, but Putin announced the strategy but didn't specify the specialities receiving the exemptions. This move by the Russian leadership suggests that the Kremlin is prioritizing using skilled workers in the production of Russian weapons over having skilled soldiers fight in Russia's military. Additionally, prominent Russian mill bloggers have intensified a long-standing Russian information operation that seeks to weaponize religion to discredit Ukraine. Kyiv's decision to terminate the lease on the Kyiv-Pechersk Lavra Reserve with the Kremlin-affiliated Ukrainian Orthodox Church Moscow Patriarchate led to Russian mill bloggers accusing Kyiv of repressing freedom of religion within Ukraine. Igor Girkin claimed that Ukraine will likely take over the Lavra by military force to bloodily pit the Russians on both sides of an artificial border against each other. The Institute further took a look at the Reaper drone incident, claiming the incident will not lead to direct conflict as both sides are reluctant to go to war with each other. The researchers also assessed the announcement by the Polish Prime Minister that his country could send MiG-29 fighters to Ukraine. According to them, Ukraine could use them in counter-offensive operations should they arrive with enough time in advance. And to wrap up the report, the evening update by the General Staff of Ukraine. The Russian Federation does not give up its intentions regarding the occupation of Ukraine, continues offensive actions regardless of losses. The enemy is concentrating its main efforts on the Liman, Bakhmut, Avdiivka, Marinka, and Shahtarsk directions. Due to the inability to defeat the defense forces of Ukraine, the Russian Federation uses terror tactics. It carries out shelling of populated areas, thereby grossly violating the norms of international humanitarian law. In the Kupiansk and Liman directions, the enemy does not stop trying to break through the defense of our troops. The enemy led unsuccessful offensive actions in the areas of Bilohorivka and Spirne settlements. In the direction of Bakhmut, the enemy continues to storm the city of Bakhmut. Our defenders repelled enemy attacks in the areas of Orihovo-Vasilivka and Bodanivka settlements. In the Avdiivka, Marinka, and Shakhtarsk directions, the enemy carried out unsuccessful offensive actions in the areas of Stepove, Kamianka, Siverne, Marinka, and Vuhledar settlements. In the Zaporizhia and Kherson directions, the enemy is conducting defensive operations. Because of their own powerlessness, the occupiers are fighting with the civilian population on the temporarily occupied territory of the Kherson Oblast. After effective fire damage on March 12th to 13th in areas of concentration of the enemy and as a result of large losses, the invaders are intensifying regime measures in individual settlements. Russian occupiers usually travel in civilian cars taken from local residents. Also on March 14th, the movement of a column of occupiers towards Crimea together with the looted property was noted. In another settlement of the Kherson Oblast, the enemy is carrying out counter-sabotage measures. Justifying their actions, the villagers are accused of murdering a Russian soldier whose body was found. And that wraps up today's report. If you're interested in any of the articles and want to read up on the details, you can find links in the description as usual. If you enjoyed the report and found it informative, please consider sharing it with others and giving me a like. I hope you will join me again tomorrow. Thank you for tuning in and have a great day. You were listening to The Account. Slava Ukraini.